Morning. So to kick us off, and let's start with you, Marianne, can you define the role of advocacy and lobbying, what it is, how you do it?
Yeah, great question. And good morning, everyone. I have been asked this, and even by clients that have hired us, say, now tell me, what exactly is it that you do? What does a lobbyist do? What is advocacy? So we have to answer that regularly. And one of my former business partners, who unfortunately passed several years back, came up with an analogy. Lobbyists are like Sherpas. Sherpas guide hikers who have a goal to get to the summit, right, of a mountain, the Himalayas, but they need the Sherpa in many cases if they're not the most experienced hiker, because the Sherpa knows the climate, the culture, the language, everything that hiker needs to make the climb, but the hiker makes the climb. And that's what we always say to our groups. You don't hire me and say, go get my bill passed, Marianne, go get me money in the budget. We work together. So that's the first thing that we say to folks in terms of the type of advocacy we do. It's very collaborative. I use the word team all the time. I don't like the word I in advocacy. It doesn't fit well. No one does anything alone. So just like that Sherpa and the hiker, we're a team, we're a partner, and we work better because of it. So I like that analogy. It gives you that sense we're in this together. I don't do it for you, I do it with you. And then what is it? Advocacy, at the end of the day, there are a lot of definitions and fancy terms. But for me, what I tell my clients and the folks I'm privileged to work with is it's raising your voice, it's amplifying the message. It is working collectively for a shared goal, no matter what that goal is. So I'll pause there because I know Kate and others have some good things to add to that.
I'll jump in. Good morning, everybody. I'm Kate Robinson, and I'm in the Legislative Office Building in Hartford, Connecticut. And we're going to have a House and Senate session today. I want to echo what Marianne said. As professional lobbyists, we don't do it for the client, we do it with the client. But we also think of ourselves, at least down here in Connecticut, as force multipliers. A lot of times, I really believe that our clients are the policy experts. They are kind of doing the work in the community on the ground, and they are identifying what the policy gaps are and what the funding gaps are and what the service gaps are. And they're communicating that to me as their lobbyist so that I can help them to develop a plan on how to properly and effectively communicate that reality that they're experiencing to legislators. We have a part-time legislature here in Connecticut, so most of the elected officials here that I work with have jobs outside of this place. And so what we're really trying to do is magnify the voice of the client, but also make sure that their time is well spent. And then one of the other things I just wanted to offer as a distinction, a lot of times we talk about grassroots advocacy, and all of us are part of grassroots. We are citizens, we are residents where we live, we are constituents where we live. And, that makes us part of something. But a lot of you who have already engaged in one form or another, who already raised your hands because you've testified or who your legislators are, you're kind of further down that path or further up the mountain on that hike, as Marianne mentioned. And I would like you to think to yourselves about how to develop and strengthen those relationships. So you're what we call grass tops, right? That you become a resource for your legislators, that you become a known person with expertise in your area of expertise, and that you begin to think of yourself as a peer with some of your elected officials so that they'll return your call or they'll reach out to you if they have a question.
So, Marianne, let me kick it back to you just for a minute. Can you define federal and state impact on policy changes and how these are intertwined, particularly where we find ourselves today?
Another great question. Thanks, Suzanne. I'll start and then ask my colleagues here to weigh in. But now we are seeing more than ever how intertwined those are. But I will say this because our firm, again, we're very privileged to work with mostly nonprofit organizations. Most are statewide, and they span healthcare, human services, housing, civil legal aid. So we are seeing it across not just one account or two, but a number of accounts. Here's what happens. Some accounts are heavily dependent on federal funding, heavily. They could be established under federal law. And so right now, those entities are really reeling, quite frankly, and need a tremendous amount of support. So we are doing a ton of work with them, and others have very, diverse funding bases. I have one group that gets very little, almost nothing from the federal government. That's a good position to be in right now, a better position to be in. And then others fall somewhere in between. So it is this constant interplay between how are you funded, state, federal, private grants, and again, some are diverse. So what's happening now with all of the uncertainty, both at the state level and of course the federal uncertainty driving that state level uncertainty, quite frankly, it's disproportionate. So that's what people need to realize, that as we're hearing information, some groups are going to be taking that in and really reacting far more strongly than others. I don't have a single group, though, that won't be impacted in some way by a federal funding cut, a change to a law, and even things like cuts to federal workers that can reduce their access to information. Because that's what people forget. For so many federal programs and then the state counterpart programs, you need eligibility, you need to apply. That can be complex. You rely on federal workers with expertise to get them through the process to even get the service. So I would just say to you that the interplay has never been more magnified right now with everyone. To Kate's point before, what I've told all my groups to do is gather the data. How much do you get from the federal government? Where do you get it? What timeline does it come to you on? That all matters right now because things are happening fast and furious with most of the action yet to come. So my first order of business is understand that interplay, gather the data, share it with both the members of the legislature and members of Congress, because our state is watching what Congress does. They're trying to pass bills that will mitigate the impacts, and then they're kind of poised and waiting. I'll pause there.
And moving funding from the federal level to the state level, which means the more effective we are at the state level, the better chance we have to not lose all our funding. Kate,
Right.
did you want to weigh in on that one as well?
Yeah, I mean, I echo what Marianne is saying, and maybe Kathy wants to weigh in on this because, you are actively running a program that probably is impacted by both, the changes in personnel, but also, some of those stop, start things that have happened. And I think part of, being a good partner and seeing yourself as a good partner is actually having the facts ready and being reliable, not just kind of being in overdrive and hyper reactive. And we're all feeling a little bit of that tension and that stress, but to kind of be prepared and understand that people are really just trying to discern what the facts are, and you want to be a reliable resource when people have those questions.
Yeah, I agree with everything that both of you have shared on this. And I would say, in the advocacy realm, right? Because one question here is also diversified funding. That's a different webinar. But I think the idea of having these relationships, building them, and whenever you start or whenever you deepen those relationships, it can't be soon enough, right? You know, the sooner you get started, the stronger the relationships are, whether it's through this part of what we're experiencing or it's going to be later. We are going to rely on the state to support us, and our work is supported from state funding and all private funding as well. But we do have on one of our programs federal funding that comes through the state, and so we'll have to see where that where if it changes and where and when it does. But I think in terms of the advocacy, it's just so important to be building the relationships all the time, because we don't know when, right? Pandemic was another example of that. We did not have lots of strong relationships in the State House. We had a line item, but that had made its way through, but the individual relationships with legislators had not really been work that the organization was doing. During the pandemic, we spent a lot of time on Zooms, reaching out to people, offering services, offering our resources to legislators for their constituents. And that started to build those relationships that we are now, in this case, and where we are now, building both the support we get through the state, but also at this particular time, relying on those relationships that we've now spent several years nurturing. So I think that's whenever it is, if you're there, keep going. If you haven't yet, get started, you know, wherever you are in it, now is the time.
So I think we answered my next question, is why should people on this call take action now? So there's no time like the present. So let me move on to what are some of the first steps to organizing? And Kathy, can I start with you?
Sure. What we did was literally sent emails out to legislators early on before we engaged our agency that we work with, lobbyists that we work with. We sent emails saying, here's who we are, here's what we do. If we can get on a Zoom with you and tell you more about our services. Sometimes we got legislators on the call, sometimes it was their staff. But it allowed us the opportunity to, in a 30-minute call, not longer, even 20, to share the resources. How can it help them as staffers? What does the legislator need to know about the work that we do? Some of the facts, but also a story. Every call had a story, whether it was just a thing that happened 2 days before, whatever was just a genuine, real story of the work that we do, and shared that with legislators, and how we could be that resource for them was very, very helpful. I think it gave them a sense of us wanting to partner, and not just, as I think we're, alluding to earlier, the idea that we're going to start this when we need to get in the budget, or we're going to start this because we have a bill that we want to, get passed, or we want to talk about. So what resources, how are we as an organization the resource for our legislators? So that's how we began. And then it just went from there to sending over a copy of the annual report or an invitation to something, walking in, dropping those off, saying hello to staffers, sending swag. And by that, the stuff that stays around, right? So that people don't forget. Sometimes for us, even resource, how to help a person who's called and is struggling or is extremely stressed. What are some of the tips for how staffers can take that call, so that it was the kind of thing that stays on someone's desk? So some of the ideas anyway.
So let me stay with you, Kathy, for just 1 minute. The question has come up, should organizations be hiring a lobbyist? And if so, how does this change the role of the organizational leader?
So yes, we did it. We also worked for a while on our own for a couple of reasons. I think once, certainly when an organization allocates funds, right, to something, we pay attention to it. We work on it. We make sure that we're doing the work. That's one of the reasons. It keeps you focused as a leader, as an organization, your board, your staff. It also, the organization that you're working with, the lobbyists, will help you stay focused. That partnership is really key to making the work move forward. I think that they've been enormously helpful to us in figuring out what comes first? What do we do first? Who are the most important meetings to have? How do we want to approach something? What do we want to say and when? They've helped us to identify opportunities to testify that were not directly related to us. I testified at the Poverty Commission, a suicide organization at the Poverty Commission, to say why the support for all of the things that they're focused on, why they need to continue to fund and support that work from our perspective as a suicide prevention organization. So it didn't benefit us directly, so to speak, but it was important to do. So I absolutely think that working with a lobbyist is a good idea. It changes our role in that I think it improves it. It makes it better. It helps me to be better in my role, to have the expertise of other folks who are helping and care very much about our organization and our mission and helping us achieve what we're hoping to be doing at that time. So I think it's really positive.
So I know I'm the moderator, but as somebody who has hired a lobbyist, Kate, we had a long-standing relationship that we so benefited from in ways that you wouldn't necessarily think of. But it certainly she helped me come up to speed more quickly and help as I was going through transitioning out of my role, my staff becoming equally knowledgeable as well. So I think there's a lot of reasons to do it, getting us on task forces and things like that that you wouldn't ordinarily think of. So in addition to working with a lobbyist, can you guys identify some additional resources for the group that might help them be, after this call, more successful?
Sure, I'll kick off and then I'm sure Kate
Okay.
does. But one of the things I encourage my groups to do, especially now, is are there other organizations that you can partner with, learn from, participate in? For instance, we learned, and again, your relationships, we always say you shouldn't operate in a silo, in a vacuum. To Kathy's point, she testified beyond her direct interest because poverty is a factor. It's like when school teachers used to come in and testify about childcare, testify about nutrition. I can't teach a hungry child. It has that power to move beyond your direct self-interest. What we do, and I'll give you something very concrete, I do several healthcare related groups. We have an advocacy group, well-known consumer advocacy group called Healthcare for All. I encourage all my groups to become members, to sign up for their newsletters. They have incredible information. They're the lead advocates for all things healthcare I'm Massachusetts based. And I reached out to them with all the federal, chaos and swirling. I reached out to them and said, hey, do you have a group that's informing people? Well, they sure do. A coalition was formed and it includes almost every hospital in our state, most of the nonprofit healthcare organizations in our state, and their sole purpose, this coalition, is to try to protect the healthcare access and status of Massachusetts residents in every capacity. So you can find resources that inform you, ground your organization. So as Kate said, there's a lot of chaos, a lot of fear right now. The more facts we can get, the more collaborations we can and connections we can make with groups we trust. We trust their information. We know their mission and we're united. And that's all they asked in joining that broad coalition was, here are our two goals in our mission statement. Do you support these? And then you were signed up. So that's just one example I can give, but I encourage my groups to do it so they're not in a silo, in a vacuum.
Yeah, I'll jump onto that and, kind of lift up in a slightly different way what both Kathy and Marianne have said, which is that cross-pollinating is a networking opportunity for either you as an individual or the organization or company that you work with. And so, one of the organizations I work with is Planned Parenthood of Southern New England, and they cover Connecticut and Rhode Island, but they are affirmatively going and participating in other campaigns, the Husky for Immigrants campaign, for example, to make sure that undocumented people have access to our Medicaid program and healthcare, because they understand as a healthcare provider that there's a group of people who are participating in the workforce and part of our economy and living in our state who do not have access to healthcare benefits, and they present at Planned Parenthood as uninsured people. And, eventually somebody's got to pay for that, either through private grant dollars or state grant dollars. And structurally, it makes more sense for everybody to make sure people are getting preventative care as opposed to waiting until something is a crisis or an emergency. So that's an example of Planned Parenthood not necessarily being all about birth control and bodily autonomy all the time. It's really about population health, harm reduction, and systems change to make sure that everybody has adequate access to professional licensed medical care, right? Affordable medical care. And that's an example of that cross-pollinating where it's not their primary objective, but they certainly recognize the value by participating and putting their muscle into that other area of policy, not just specifically into reproductive rights and the statutes associated with that.
Kathy, did you want to add anything?
Sorry. No, I think those are really good examples. And
then I would add, kind of going back to the lobbyist question, it's not just getting a lobbyist, it's getting the right lobbyist. So Kate and Marianne are both examples of people who really only deal with nonprofit issues. And I've interviewed a bunch of different lobbyists. They come in all shapes and sizes. And what I would say in terms of resources is somebody who has a similar organization to yours, asking them who they work with. And if there's a synergy there with that lobbyist may already be educated in your area of impact and can be more successful more quickly than bringing somebody in for whom, like, let's say healthcare, they've never done it. And Kate, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat, Kate has a annual conference for new lobbyists in October. That's not expensive. It takes place in Hartford, and it's a really great resource for people who are fairly new to lobbying. I think I've sent a bunch of people there, not just from Connecticut. I think we've already touched on this, but can you, I'll go back to start with Kathy, perhaps. How might members of this group work together or with others of similar concerns that we haven't already touched on?
I think, as you just said, Suzanne, the idea of reaching out to another organization to learn from them, which is how we found our lobbyists. They were working with, actually, our then board chair was working with them at a different organization. I think as organizations, leaders, staffers, connecting to other organizations, talking about what the challenges are and what are some of the successes. We're happy to share, for example, what have we left with our legislators? What materials have we developed over the last several years? How can we have these conversations, as we said, where those collaborations can be used as an example. So to go see a legislator with another nonprofit leader to say, here's what we're working on in different ways. Maybe we're not, our work is not actually being done together, but we're both doing the work. And here's how you can help us. Here's how you can continue to support or know about the work. I think one of the things that's important to me about advocacy is, again, not just about the money, but do they know what we do? When we're in front of them, when they need our services, when they're thinking about these challenges, who do they think of? What organizations are they aware of? And I think it's important for our legislators to understand the work that's being done, the grassroots part, right? What's happening on the ground every day for them to know and understand. And so I think all of the ways that we can work together to share ideas and then even to visit legislators when it makes sense together is definitely an opportunity, right, to leverage. So I think through the Boston Club, there's lots of opportunity, right, to meet other organizations and connect. So we can do that.
So I'm going to ask
Exciting.
2 more questions from my list, and then I see we have some questions coming in from the audience. But while we were waiting for this to start, Kathy, I'm going to start with you again. Sorry. We were talking about you're finding a legislative champion. Can you describe what that is and why that's important to your success?
Sure. I'll admit, right, before having a lobbyist, this was not clear to me what it was. So again, the reason to have the professionals helping us understand this, the experts, really mattered. So a legislative champion is the person who's going to submit and support your request. So in our case, our line item. In the House, we have a champion who, when the line item was cut, our champion submitted the amendment and then asked others to sign on to the amendment. And that increased, in this current budget cycle, increased the line item funding for us. Now, in the Senate, we have a champion who came to us from, I mentioned earlier, the Zoom calls and meetings we did during COVID. We met a senator who then came to us later with an idea, and we worked together to flesh out that idea and how we could support more people. She became our champion in the Senate, and she will again, when this budget now at the Senate when they pick it up, she will be our champion to say this line item is important and why. She'll speak on our behalf in the Senate. So again, a reason why having this kind of support from a lobbyist can be so helpful.
Kate, did you want to add anything?
I would say, that concept of, well, getting oriented to what this environment is. In a lot of ways, it feels like the mothership. We think everybody's watching everything we do every minute of every day. And in fact, it's just like a big high school or a small high school. And if you don't go to this high school, you really kind of don't know you kind of know what happens in high school, but unless you're going to that high school, you don't know what's happening in that high school. So what you're really talking about, if you're hiring a lobbyist or having a legislative campaign or a legislative ask, is, getting somebody who is integrated into the environment, going back to that Sherpa concept, who understands the rhythm, the predictable things. Pattern recognition is a huge part of what we do, right? Because we've been watching these elected officials in some cases for decades. We know what they care about. We know what they don't care about. We know what makes them cranky. We know what they're excited about. And so, we're kind of one step closer or 2 steps closer than the high information voter. I would consider a lot of you to be high information voters. And what we're really kind of talking about is making the jump from being a high information voter to being a participant, right? And there are a couple different ways you can do that. You don't have to hire a lobbyist to be a participant, right? You probably should get on a few organizations' email distribution lists if if you care about mental health, if you care about reproductive rights, if you care about water quality or climate change. There are organizations that have state level advocacy efforts, and you can put yourself on those email distribution lists. And I bet you in a minute, you will get some sort of email saying, call your legislator. And really, if you want to take just one small thing to do out of today, one would be to get on one of those lists, and the second would be to do the thing that comes through to you through that alert system, right? To activate. The other thing that I'll say is, as sometimes the monkey in the middle, right, between the client and the elected officials, a lot of people get stuck in what I call analysis paralysis, right? What's the best way to write the alert? What's the best color t-shirt to wear? And sometimes I'll have a meeting, not just with a client, but with the whole board or, board and staff. and there could be 10 or 15 or 20 people in these meetings in analysis paralysis. And I would just say, how many of you have actually made a phone call in the last 3 days about this issue? Okay, we're all going to stop. We're all going to go into our corners. We're all going to make 2 phone calls right now. Right. And so, let let there be a division of labor. Certain people can make those decisions. Certain people can go down those rabbit holes, but the whole organization shouldn't go down that rabbit hole. The organization should be dedicated to those action items, right?
So to me, as a leader of a nonprofit, one of the things that was my job to do was to get constituents to make those phone calls. And everybody's afraid. They actually think, Senator Blumenthal is going to answer the phone and they're going to have to be articulate. No. So it's way simpler than you think. You're not talking to anybody. You're talking to a staffer perhaps, or an answering machine. And basically they're going to write down on a little piece of paper, are you for or against a piece of legislation? So that brings me to my last question for now, and then we'll go to the audience questions. How can we engage our constituents and get them to take action? Because it feels daunting to everyone. Marianne, let's start with you this time.
Sure. And Suzanne, when you said it, people are afraid. I actually coined a phrase and I use it in every advocacy discussion I have with my groups, with their boards, with their overall memberships, with their parents, the fear factor. You have to confront the fear factor. We're all afraid to do something for the first time that we're unfamiliar with. And so what we do with our groups is you acknowledge it and then make it easy. So here's what we do, some concrete things. If you have a board meeting and, take the board and say, instead of just saying, you need to call your legislators, you need to email, why don't we take 5 minutes right now? You all have a phone, you have a laptop, choose which one you want to do. Give yourself a little space. And we create a little script. But I'm not a big fan of scripts and everyone, you better generate 1,000 or you're not going to get the notice. I'm a big fan of personal. And that's what I think matters. You all need the right facts, but then you need to make it your own in one line. I don't mean in, a tome about everything. The shorter, the better. And I always tell, so that's what we provide. I've done it numerous times. We walk right in, really effective with a parent group. And I usually have a parent who's done it before. They lead, not me. So they've been through the service. They have that firsthand experience and they can tell them, I did it and I survived and I'm here today to help you. And so we've literally had parents and they were there for a purpose, a parent group. So we didn't ask them, come in, take all this time and do it. They were already there. And we gave them the data they needed. Here's the number or here's the email. What are you comfortable with? And we're right here. They did it. They survived. And some of them today are our best advocates. They then took off way beyond what they're now hosting the legislators at their events. They form friendships. It's getting past that. But I find it's most effective. Don't just tell people, call. You need, again, sorry with the Sherpa thing, guide them, help them, do it. I even do, subject line means a lot in email. You are conveying in that subject line why you're writing. So I say to them, use it well. And I give subject lines because we know how the staff divide up these emails. They're getting hundreds, sometimes thousands. That subject line helps them right off the bat. FY26 budget, save pediatric palliative care. Boom, I've just told them why, budget, PD-PAL, line item. Right there in the subject line, we've delivered half of the message in the brief subject line. Just say one other thing. We talked about personal. You need data. Return on investment value is another thing I would add. Yeah, you need data. How many do you serve? How effective is your service? What's the return on investment? By providing pediatric palliative care, what kind of savings does that generate? That's what I ask my groups to do. We're in tough times, but you should be doing it anyway. even if we're not in tough times, everyone should know their value and be talking about that as part of their message. Finally, photos. I had the best thank you ever delivered. The legislature passed an item and we asked the parents, can you send a quick thank you? This one mom had twins. She sent her senator a photo. The twins were jumping in the air for joy. Thanks for passing our amendment. That's all she said. Said, how long did it take you? 2 minutes. It's her favorite photo of her twins. So we try to be concrete because there is the fear factor. But again, a group can help each other. Doesn't take me. A group, if there's one person who's done it and can lead, it can happen.
I added some quick statements in the chat for what to include. Does anybody want to add to that? Otherwise, we'll move to the audience questions. Okay, I'm just going to go to the top. As a nonprofit, how do you balance your advocacy with maintaining your 501c3 status? Kathy, that might be for you to start.
For us, it's not, well, for any organization, it's not a problem. It's good to have your lobbyist organization supporting, making sure you don't make any mistakes. But advocating as an organization, as an individual, right? I live in this state. I'm allowed to advocate for the things that, as a constituent, that also matter to me as a person. But I think, getting in there and saying, this is what's important and why, and this is what our organization needs to do to have support to do the work that we want to do. Those are that's the way that we have approached the work that we're doing. So I don't know if Kate or Marianne have more specific guidelines or guidance on that.
We have clients who have both advocacy and then do have political. We have ACLU of Connecticut. We also have Planned Parenthood of Southern New England who have political action committees and participate in the political, during, elections and do endorsements. But that work is literally firewalled and separate. They are different entities. And so for me, I am only advocating on the policy side. I am only representing the not-for-profit effort. I am not involved in their endorsements in any way or their fundraising in any way. There's a firewall between those two things. And I am in Connecticut, so I can't speak to kind of what the rules or regulations are related to that in Massachusetts, but I know my lines are very clearly defined.
And I'll just add quickly, because I know we have a lot of other questions, that we have a lot of rules, right, Kathy, in reporting here in Massachusetts regarding that. Similar to Kate, if groups are concerned, you do have, the 5% Suzanne just put in as a 501c3, you can spend up to 5% of your budget on lobbying. I have groups that have formed separate entities. And then you have to watch out too. A lot of our groups too use only member dues, to pay for lobbying advocacy services. So there's all kinds of things that groups do to comply, first and foremost, comply with the law, and then second, figure out what's the right fit, what level of advocacy do they need to do for their organization, and then figure out it fits with your 501c3 status or time to think about another, some form PAC. So to Kate's point, but again, I too have nothing to do with the PAC. So I focus on their legislative budgetary advocacy goals, and the PAC is over here.
So another question is, apart from supporting one side of a contested election, what role, if any, do campaign contributions play? Kate, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, in Connecticut, we have some really strict guidelines around state contractors and lobbyists cannot make political contributions beyond $100 to an individual candidate. and $250 to a political action committee. That both takes away my constitutional rights, but it also, or limits my constitutional rights, but it also preserves what the balance is in my individual checking and savings. We're not allowed to write a business check for anything. Every contribution must be from our personal funds. So certainly there are people and there are entities that form and create political action committees, but they're not in Connecticut, and I think under our federal laws also, they're not allowed to coordinate in any meaningful way with the candidate. So as it relates to Planned Parenthood of Southern New England, for example, they will make an endorsement, their PAC will make an endorsement, but the PAC cannot coordinate with the individual candidate or candidate's campaign. So we could probably do a whole other webinar related to this. Bottom line is, as I am limited to $100, there are people I will never hesitate to write a check for $100 for, because the sacrifices they make on the issues that I lobby are so much greater than $100. In many cases, they're really taking a stand, and they're taking a stand because of their own convictions. They're not doing it for $100, right? $100 is a nice way to make sure you end up on somebody's email list, a nice way to make sure you get invited to a reception, a nice way to make sure you get invited to a victory party. It is a way of participating. It is not the only way to participate. It is not the most important way to participate. It is a way to participate.
And if you don't have the funds to, it's going to lead to the next question, but if you don't have the funds to contribute, you can join a phone bank, you can knock on doors, you can stand in front of the supermarket, which I won't do, but some people could, somebody else could. So for those organizations that have limited financial resources, what advice would you provide them to advocate for their causes, in addition to what we just said?
Yeah, I think it's all about relationships. So any way you can interact, because you got to do that first, right? The outreach has to come first. And I want to just mention a couple other concrete things. Again, I'm here in Massachusetts, so we are a full-time legislature. Okay, so that varies from other states. I think someone asked a question about that. It is not all the same at all. So we are a full-time 2-year legislature here. So no breaks. Well, August, but other than that, they're rolling. They are in the district a lot. A lot of the legislators. So once you find out yours, if you've never connected, find out, do a little research on them. LinkedIn, Facebook, as Kate said, sign up. They all have newsletters. They all have not only their state website, their own websites. And that tells you a bit about them. Where'd they go to college? Are they married or not? Do they have children? You find connections you didn't know you had. The biggest other tip I want to give, district office hours. For those outside, typically outside of Boston, like I live in Watertown, Mass, both my rep and my senator have district hours, and they post them on their separate websites. I'll be here for coffee from 9 to 10:30 on Friday morning. Drop by and say hi. It's a great informal way. You're in a diner having coffee. It takes away that I'm at the State House or I'm here trying to pen the perfect email. You're relaxed. It's a cup of coffee. So people love that. They may have theirs at their town or city hall. Again, I really encourage people, just do a little research first, get to know them, then get to know them. And if it's through a district office hour or that first email or call, just get it started. And then you will find ways. And I just want to say, campaigns appreciate even small contributions, $25, $50. They actually brag about that, not the big ones. Some like to say, we have contributions from $5 to whatever, and we're proud of them all. So I wouldn't say, oh, I don't have the $100. So give what you have, sign up to do something. And legislators tell me that that often means more to them than the people they know have money. and write the check.
So I think you want your legislator to call you by your first name, then you know you're in. So there's a question here. How effective is calling your legislator? Kate, do you want to take that first?
Sure. A lot of times people say, what's the most effective way to communicate with a legislator? Should I email? Should I call them? Should I write them a letter? And I basically say lather, rinse, repeat. All of it. Don't write all of it all the time. And yes, phone calls do matter. I will say post-pandemic, there's a lot of about communication that is more frustrating now than it was before 2020. People are working from home, schedules are erratic. It both benefits us and frustrates us as individuals and organizationally. And I would say, it, to me, it really is lather, rinse, repeat, because each one of those things doesn't take an enormous amount of time. And in most cases, you're going to be leaving a voicemail. In most cases, I don't know the last time any of us picked up the phone that we got the person we were trying to call on the first try. But, and if you are in a position that you do have a cell phone number for somebody, and, that is kind of like, the brass ring or the gold standard, in many cases, texting is the most effective way. My job is to be a professional pest. It's not necessarily everybody's job to be a professional pest. I try to have self-awareness about that. But the other thing I will say is the power of the pen, the old school handwritten envelope. When's the last time any of us had a handwritten envelope land at our home or land at our workplace? It definitely gets people's attention. If your mom didn't send you a birthday card, chances are you're not getting a handwritten envelope. It definitely gets people's attention. So I want to encourage people to be thinking that way. As old school as it is, I think it is very effective these days.
Yeah. I'll second that, Kate, because we do that a lot. I think, as Mary Ann said earlier, getting your board involved. Even recently, our staff asked what they could send, for a template, a message to send. But the handwritten notes, we'll spend 10 minutes in a board meeting. I'll do them quite frequently. Right. And when we can, we drop stuff off, walk in and drop off a note with, whatever it is, an invitation to something, as we said earlier. I think all of those things are really important. And I'll just add about the idea of, if organizations that have a small budget. So we started small too, right? We didn't put a lot of money into it initially because we needed to make sure, like with most things, nonprofit budget, you're squeezing out some amount of money for something that isn't direct service, with the hopes that it's going to ultimately lead to more, right? It's going to impact your organization in a way that carries the value and weight. I think there are a lot of organizations, lobbying firms that will work with nonprofits starting small. So figuring out what's the budget, right, that you can afford, what amount of money, and how can they guide you, whether it's a lot of involvement for them or less, and just some offering some guidance in a smaller way, or attending meetings with you, right? Our lobbyists attend the meeting with us. Maybe in the beginning that wasn't isn't necessarily true, or for not all budgets, can they do that? So I think working with finding some really good people and talking to them about what you can do makes sense.
And joining forces with other similar organizations who are working on the same. So maybe you all don't hire your own lobbyist, maybe you pool your funds and work together on an important issue. Final thoughts. Can you guys, what something we haven't touched on yet? What can help this group be more effective today? Mary Ann, you want to go first?
Sure. And mine is not so much. I think we've given you a lot of tips, reaching out to other groups, reaching out to your legislator, to your member of Congress. We can't stress it enough, and finding ways to get help and resources that overcome the fear factor. I attended, it's called the 9:30 call. It's for early education and care. They hold it every day. They started it during the pandemic, and they had a speaker who advocates on the federal level. She was great, just doing an update. I don't even do anything directly in the EEC space, but anyway, you always, like I said, you gather information from a resource that you trust. So I said, I'm going to jump on that call. And she said something, because I think we need to leave people, she said, right now, as advocates, and we all are, whether you are just going to do it today, inspired by what you've heard, we need to keep our eyes on the prize right now. We need to keep ourselves informed from organizations, places that we trust. Get involved, stay informed, because a lot is about to come our way. She said, because we wanted to end on a note of hope, what gives you hope? And she said, you do. The voices of advocates do. Because this is not, it's going to happen with or without us. That's what I always say to my group. Congress is about to make some very big decisions, and they do it with or without you. Would you rather raise your voice and be part of it, or have it done and then be on the reactive side? I'd rather always be part of it and lift up the voice and figure out a way to do that. But then that's what she said, we don't win if we don't speak up. And remember, litigation, there's also, as we watch Congress, everything is playing out in the courts as well. And she said it's starting to succeed, and the pillars of democracy are standing firm. So hopefully that gives a little hope that there are multiple ways that information can come in. There are ways to advocate and stay informed, but only if we do it.
I put in the chat, indivisible, and I'm not saying that from a political perspective, it's just a good guidebook. They actually based their strategies that they're recommending on effective lobbying on what the Tea Party did, and they are definitely not the Tea Party. Kate, final thoughts?
Yes, I would encourage you all to persevere through that little bit of discomfort, right? All of us, have to kind of overcome a little bit of something, especially if we're new to something. But I think all of us have experience that we can draw from where, if you're anxious about something or nervous about something, it really means you're taking it seriously. And that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. The other thing is, again, from my perspective here in Connecticut, we don't want things, Connecticut has a reputation for being progressive, for being blue. My goal for Connecticut someday is to be the Denmark of states. I want us to be a destination state for human rights and individual liberties and autonomy. That's what I want. That's my North Star. There are a lot of people who share that vision, but it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens because people are standing in the hallway and they're standing outside, and there are voicemails in the inbox, and there are emails in the inbox, and there are people at the grocery store pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And, we didn't get to this blue state place by accident. We are in this blue state place on purpose. But I can tell you also that there is a sensation of an undertow, right? All of us have access to Cape Cod and the National Seashore. We know what an undertow feels like. We're feeling an undertow. And if there isn't something to push against that undertow, we could be at risk for losing things that we've become very comfortable having. So I encourage you all to just get a little bit more comfortable with that discomfort and step into something a little bit different. Think of it as having a sense of adventure and recognizing that your voice really is important, and transitioning from knowledge to activism. I encourage you to take that step.
Kathy, you get the last word.
I'll take a slight angle on it, I think, and just say to my fellow nonprofit leaders and the advocates that work with them, the agencies and organizations, the work being done by the nonprofits is essential to the residents of any state, of every state. The work you do matters so much. Don't be afraid to stand up and advocate for it, to, stomp your feet and your hands if you need to, and, get attention and be brave to tell everybody what you're doing, how important the work is that you're doing, and make sure that people are supporting it. It's in the same way that we need to or want to try to find other kinds of donors and supporters. We have to do it with our legislators and our state and local governments too. So get out there and don't be afraid to do it. You are doing incredible work, and you have a right to share that, to use your voice to share that work, the impact of the work you're doing.
Well, thank you, ladies, for sharing your expertise. Thank you to all of you who joined us this morning. If any of us can help further, you
Absolutely.
just reach out and ask, and I'm sure everybody would be happy to. So I think our time is up. I'm gonna let you all go, but thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.